Hopefully this camera doesn't stop. It's had the in the past, what it does is it just like all of a sudden goes into a freeze frame, and I'm stuck there for like until somebody tells me or until I realize it.
Oh man. Yeah, I like that mug. I've never noticed that yeah, that's a good mug. I don't know, like it's funny like how it goes. I've sort of pruned a lot of my wardrobe because I don't do much anymore, but doing that
Right.
has really sort of emphasized to me how much I've leaned into like the dad persona because like the portion of my like relaxed shirts that aren't like just monocolor shirts or like just like a Papa Bear and Datasaurus and like shirts that I have for the boys because they like them. Like I have a Lightning McQueen shirt and a Cactus shirt because they love like Cactus and Lightning McQueen and stuff. So it's funny to
Right.
like see that. And then of course the mugs. I have this mug is not a dad mug, but I have several dad mugs as well. I'm actually thinking we had one of the good things about kids going to school is picture day. I was never a fan of this as a kid, but as an
Right.
adult,
As an
I'm
adult,
like
yeah.
it's fantastic to, and so like our oldest is in school, our youngest is not, and I'm like, we're gonna go and have the exact same studio take pictures of our youngest too, and then I'm gonna get a mug made that has their pictures on it. That's sort of my plan because like that's what dads do.
Yeah,
Oh
as you get older and as you have kids, it becomes less and less about you and more about them. So it's funny how like they shape your entire life. Like, I mean, if you look at the shirt that I'm wearing right now, I'm wearing a Captain America shirt because
yeah,
when we went to Disney, we got like some shirts and stuff, and we ordered like shirts of like Marvel and Star Wars, and we went. And but again, I'm not going there necessarily for myself. Going there to watch your kids enjoy things and enjoy
right.
stuff with them. So I don't know if I think I can't remember if I told you this. So I'm not like a big roller coaster person. I really don't like roller coasters. Like
Yeah,
if it's just me and my wife, it's like, yeah, I'm not getting on that roller coaster, right?
right.
But it's funny. We went over there, and just since we're talking about it,
Yeah.
and the kids were like, "Hey, let's go on this roller coaster," and I'm like, "Okay, right." And so to be there with my kids, and they were like my emotional support,
Yeah.
and then when we got off, and to know that we did that together
Yeah.
as a family, like you could not say no to that. You know,
Yeah. Did you ride Space Mountain?
dude, we rode like all the rides, like stuff that I
Okay.
would never do, never have done in my life. I did. So there's this ride called it's the Incredibles, basically.
Okay.
And it goes really fast because it's like Dash, he's super fast and stuff. And so it goes like upside down and it goes,
Oh man,
this is
no.
stuff that like on my own would just give me crazy anxiety.
Hmm.
But yeah, we did like Space Mountain. We did uh Big Thunder Mountain Railroad or whatever it
Yeah.
is.
That
We
one's
did
fun too. Yeah.
all the stuff that I wouldn't do because my kids were there next to me. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? Um,
Yeah, that's real. I want to tap into that for a second, but first I'll just tell you that of course, we went to Disney World a few years back, and we went to Galveston the summer before we went to Disney World and like they had like Pleasure Pier there, and like they had some roller coasters, and like I didn't ever get on the roller coasters, because I got on a few of like the smaller rides, not even a roller coaster. And like my vertigo and like my equilibrium was just like so thrown off. It gave me huge anxiety. I had to like sit down and like just sit there and like reground myself for like 45 minutes is a huge waste of time for me and stuff. And so knowing that when we went to Disney World, I was like, oh, I'm not so sure about this. But we did end up riding Space Mountain's really great for an intro roller coaster because it's like dark, so you can't
mhm.
see anything.
Exactly.
And like that's perfect. Like that, like we rode Space Mountain so many times. We rode a couple of the other roller coasters. We didn't ride many, but we did also ride Big Thunder Mountain and stuff. And like it was a lot of fun. I think that there's just something to be said for like the Disney quality of a roller coaster, to make that a little more doable. But it was a lot. Like we rode Space Mountain. We would just ride it and then get back on and then get back on and then get back on because it was so much fun.
Yeah.
Um, and some of that's just like being there, and the experience of it. But I definitely can see, of course, we're not taking the kids to Disney World anytime soon. Um, but you know that changes the way that you think about things. I like that you started there. I think it's really, really tied to our conversation for today. And like, I don't know, the thing that I think about is exactly what you said, like how kids reground your entire life. And like, I don't know if we've gone into it in this podcast too much, but of course my older son is a special needs kid. And so we talk a lot about Team Stephen. And what we mean about like Team Stephen is like all of his support network, right? Like
Right.
his teachers and his care counselors and his therapists and even like his godparents are part of like Team Stephen. And like what's really important about Team Stephen is we communicate to them like as we're like they're all Team Stephen, they're on your team. And we're on your team and we're all just trying to like help you get the win, right? But what's really important about that is like we went and saw his godparents. They live right down the road from us, but we haven't really seen them a ton lately. But this weekend we went and saw them and hung out for a little bit. But the first thing that they started to do was ask about how things were going with him. And like that really emphasizes what is Team Stephen about. It's like here we are. These are really good friends of mine. I've known them, I don't know, since I was 18, probably. So like 20 years, right? And when we first sit down, we're not talking about work. We're not talking about like, how's your life going and what are you doing these days? And here's the fun. It's just like, hey, tell us where Steven's at. How's it going? And like that's really what it is. You know, they start off and they're immediately invested. They're definitely Team Steven because they care. They care about what's going on there. They can and how they can help. And I think that's what I think about when like your whole life gets reoriented. It's not about like they're not asking me, how Randy is your life going anymore? How are you and Steph doing? It's really like immediately about the kids. And like that's that reorientation you're talking about that like is why we wear dad shirts and drink out of dad mugs. And like all of my Legos now are all about like the Lego town that we're building together. And like I'm not really a big race car fan, but I own more Lego race car sets than like I care to admit at this point because the boys love them. And so that's it. Is like getting everybody oriented on this a single thing. And for, I mean, as a parent, it becomes really easy, right? Like it was never intentional. It's like, okay, now I'm going to focus on my kids. It was just like, that's what happened because that's what I cared about.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's a really good point. It's really like unintentional. I mean, I guess you can be intentional about it, like, hey, I'm going to do this, but if you just care, it just happens naturally. Lots of things that I do or have pivoted to are because of like, kids and stuff. Um, we mentioned like, basically pushing my boundaries because
Mhm.
of my kids, right? Because they forced me to push. And I look forward to that for you. Like, I know the kids are like younger or smaller than mine, but when they get to there and they're like, hey, and y'all are all going together, you know, again, I had the same type of stuff too. My stomach goes in knots and all that
Mhm.
stuff, but it's like all that went away. None of that even happened, right? My anxiety let go because I was watching their faces, right? It was more about like the experience together. And
Yeah.
so it makes you really think about things. And it is nice, like you said, when everybody cares, it's different. You don't feel like you're the only one doing this thing. And it also relates to like, the stuff that companies do.
Yeah.
If the typically there's like a founder or a couple founders, right? That's usually how it is, just a couple folks in the beginning, and they care so much. They care so
Yeah.
much about this world that they're building together. In the beginning, it's a very small world, right? It's one or two people, and then they start to expand, and maybe they hire a couple folks. Um, and sometimes, and there's nothing wrong with this, but sometimes we take jobs and we're not really invested the way that the founders or that the owners are
Yeah.
invested, right? It's just a job, and that's okay. I've been in that position, and I've seen folks in that position. It's like I absolutely understand, especially the more that your family grows, right? So again,
Yeah.
when you don't have kids, and I've seen this with other folks too, they don't have kids, and that's okay. You go all in, right? You go
Hmm.
all in, and that's uh, and so a lot of like maybe single folks would be great for startups, right? Because you're going all in, you're going fast, and you're trying to build this awesome world together. Um,
Well,
and
I mean, you have more care to give, right? Like, I think
yeah,
that's really what you're talking about. It's like as a parent, like, and I really struggle with this. I just want to call this out before we get into this, is because like when I was, you know, everybody's got a reason not to care. And so maybe it's not because you're a parent, but like everybody has a fixed capacity to care. I think that's the real thing. And when you do have a family, it is very likely that the larger portion of your fixed capacity to care is invested in caring about your family rather than whatever the job cares about. And so
Yeah.
sorry to interrupt, but I think
No,
that's
it's a
like
good
what
point.
really is what you're getting at, is that like, uh, you know, as it's easy to throw yourself into something, and especially founders can be so passionate. You know, I interact a lot with like founders of various companies, and man, when you hear them talk about their company, it is going to be life changing, it's going to be world changing, it is going to make it, despite the fact that objectively I know most startups fail.
Yeah.
But and you know, there's a little bit of like there's this sort of like denial of that. That's, I don't know, maybe healthy, because most founders think that they will beat the odds, right? They're beating the average, and they're going to be the company that makes it. And maybe they will. I don't know. I mean, we're in that same boat, right? We're like,
But you
we are
have to
going
be.
to
Yeah.
make it. You have to
You
be.
have to
Yeah,
be.
yeah, yeah. You have to be. And that, I think, is that driving care. That's really where that heavy amount of passion is that you have to look at those odds and say, we are going to make it. And so then you have this huge amount of passion. You care a ton about it because you have to care, because you have to make it happen. And then everybody else has to care as well. I
Yeah.
mean, everybody else, then it's a matter of like trying to get everybody else to care.
Yeah. Well, if you think about it, right, if you aren't super optimistic, if you don't, and this kind of goes back to what we talked about last time, right, is that like the story and the hero or the protagonist, right, and hard-earned victories and things like that. If if you don't think you can beat the odds, because the truth is the odds are not in your favor.
Right.
Starting to build a company, like the truth is, you know, statistically the majority of companies fail.
Right.
That's just it, right? We didn't make them up. That's, if you go do the numbers, like that's a fact.
Yeah.
But if you're going to start something and you go in there saying, well, we're probably going to fail, right, then why even get into this, right, if that's the approach. The
Right.
truth is, um that you feel passionate about this thing because it's important to you, and if it's important to you, then it's probably important to other people, right?
Hmm.
And in that case, you can get other people to care, right, to share some of that capacity. I wanted to, when you mentioned the whole thing about like a lot of founders are like, we're going to change the world, and you know, we're going to do this. It reminded me of an episode of Silicon Valley. I don't know if you've ever seen it, but
I haven't.
a friend of mine, Kyle, got me into Silicon Valley. And he was like, this was a couple years ago. The show's been, I don't know, 5 6 seasons or something now. I haven't kept up with it, but it captures like startup life so perfectly because it's so dead on. And there's this episode where they're like interviewing a bunch of startup founders at TechCrunch Disrupt, right?
Hmm.
And everybody's saying, we're gonna change the world. This is gonna change the world, right? Their solution, their thing is gonna change the world. And you know, I mean, that's kind of cool to be that optimistic. I don't even know that I'm that optimistic. I'm more of like, I want to change our world. And when I say
Right.
our world, I mean, you know, mine, yours, and then the people that are kind of on this journey with us, right? That's the world that I want to change.
Right. Yeah, I think there's a lot here. I want to maybe I want to step back from that real quick, because like I think that bit right there, I want to talk about it. It ties very heavily into story and spectacle that we talked about last time. It also ties to something we talked about way, way back when in one of the earlier episodes about like making sure that like you have the stress that you create is relevant to the like actual outcomes that you're creating. And so like what I want to start with is like you have this really optimistic founder, and they care a lot. And we're in that way kind of that same person. I agree with you that we're not really like, I'm going to change the world. I think that that's like when we talk about we're not saving babies, like I don't even know that I really want to have such a like, I'm more of a, at these days I'm more surgical, like let's change this. I don't need to change the whole world and
Yeah.
recreate the whole world. I just want to change this one thing about the world. And like maybe if we succeed there, then let's talk about the next thing to change. But let's change this one thing about the world. And we talked about it last time. We know exactly what our one thing about the world that we want to change is that we want to give people,
Their time back.
we want to give them their time back. That's one thing. I don't know, could that be life changing for some folks? Absolutely. is that going to be like rewriting the way that our world works? Probably not. And that's okay. So I want to just tackle that and say, like, I'm not sure that I'm in the game anymore with high stakes. I'm not in a high stakes game anymore. I can't be because I've got my family and that's high stakes, right? That's where all my
Yep.
high stakes go. So let's step back and let's talk about, I want to come back to in just a moment the idea that we're going to change the world. But I want to start with, I'm a founder, you're a founder, we are founders of a company. And we ended these episode last time talking about like the story is important because everybody needs to care. And story is part of the way that we do that. And this is kind of a continued conversation of that because I thought that that was such a pertinent point, and we ended our time. I had to go to another thing, and so we ended our time there last time. And so I wanted to pick up that conversation here. So I kind of want to start with, we're founders and we need everyone to care. And that's not just everyone that's working with us, but everybody that is watching us and rooting for us. Like if they're going to root for us, if people are listening to this and going to root for us, they have to care about our journey and our story and our mission as well. And so like I think the question that I would ask Graham is, and it's very tied to the, the promise of world change, is how do we get employees to care? Um, and before I get into that, I just want to say something that I'm fairly certain you started here today. We're both aligned on this, is that it's not like an employee's responsibility to care. It is totally okay if you're out there and you're listening to this and you're like, I don't care. I work for a big bank or I work in telecom and like I care not a lick about their
Yeah.
mission, but they pay well. I think that is a-okay. A-okay. Like there's nothing wrong with taking a paycheck and living your life because that means that you're investing, like we talked about, that capacity to care. You're investing that capacity to care somewhere else. And hey, that's perfectly fine. I just wanted to call that out, and don't know if you have anything you wanted to add
Yeah.
there.
Yeah. No, I agree about that. Like, I've worked jobs where I didn't really care about the mission. I didn't really care about the team, maybe. I didn't feel like connected to the team. I didn't feel
Yeah.
invested in the company, but they paid well. They allowed me to feed my family, to have a home. And that was okay too. And
Yeah.
then I've worked at other places that I thought that the mission, right, the problem that they were solving was important,
Yeah.
one that was going to be impactful.
Right.
And so I cared a little bit more, right? And then um, the truth is, though, you never care as much about somebody else's thing
Hmm.
as your own thing, right?
Right.
So when we talk about Studio Anvil, this is our thing, right? It's actually like a cooperative of things, right? It's more than
Right.
one thing, right? And that's what's really cool about this, right? Is that nobody can tell us how to define this thing that we're building, this world, this company, right? It's whatever we make it, and we've decided that it's going to be multiple things. A lot of companies will start and they're like, we're going to solve this one problem, and that's cool.
Yeah.
We're just trying to do a couple that ultimately funnel up to the one problem, right? And help accomplish the one main problem, which is time, right? The fact
Yeah.
that all our time goes into work, 40 hours a week plus, in some cases. And again, that's one of the problems we're solving in or hoping to solve in a multitude of ways. Okay,
Yeah.
so how do you get people to care? Well, one is we just have to be okay that somebody might not care, but they do good work. And that's okay, right? Is like I'm
Mm.
not going to force anybody to care about the thing that we care about.
Right.
We just want them to do, the work that we're, hopefully bringing them on to do. But I'd love for them to care about the thing that we're doing because I ultimately believe that it'll impact them in a positive way. So when you care about the work that you're doing, I feel like you're invested in it, right? Like you want to see it succeed at the end. When you don't care about something, it's a very temporary mindset, right? It's I'm working for this company, and this is just me speaking personally. I've been at some companies where it's like I'm working at this company. I don't care if things work out or not because I'm not invested. I don't really care about the mission. I don't really care
Yeah.
about the problem we're solving. And then what's happened is I've moved on shortly after to another company because I wasn't
Right.
invested. I didn't care.
Well, I think
And
that's,
and churn is hard. Churn is hard on not only companies but the individual like yourself. It's hard. I mean, we've talked about like you've got to get new insurance, right? Maybe
yeah.
you've got a 401k. All these things. It is
Yeah.
hard, and don't even get me started on like the whole interview process. That's a whole beast itself, right? So, um, part
Yeah.
of part of the way, I'm gonna let you jump in here, but part of the way that we get people to care is just to understand what they care about. I think there's a guy named like Gary V, and he talks about this sometimes, right? Is that the things that people care about changes over time. At one
Yeah.
point, they might care about a paycheck,
Hmm.
but things change in their life, priorities change. And 6 months down the road, they might care about time, right? They don't
Right.
care about getting the highest paycheck. Now they care about being able to spend time with their family, right? So understanding what people care about is part of that.
Yeah, I think that's really core. There's like so much to unpack there. The first, like, I think it was really important that you called out that like sometimes you don't care about the mission, sometimes you're not even invested in your team. So one thing that I take away from this is that like care has tiers, right? And like you can care about like you may not care about the mission, but you might care about the problem you're solving and your team is solving, or you may care a lot about the people that you're working with. And I think those are the most important cares, honestly, is to care about the people that you're working with when like because that's really where I mean that's where networks are built is and community is built is like and that's really what we're talking about is like when you care about the people that you're working with, then you care about their success. And then you care about the organism's success and so on and so forth. And so like I think that's really important is one to work with people that you care about and work with people that can care about you. Like start with that. Like let's just address that like we need to care about each other. Even if we don't care about the job or if it's just a paycheck, let's care about each other. And I think that makes for just a better society in general. That might be the most world-changing thing, even if, nothing else works out. Like if we just care about each other, we're going to be okay. Um, and so then like the other thing that you kind of mentioned there is like, you know, making sure that like it's almost like the great thing about Envel is it's sort of a bring your own passion kind of organization. And so like we have a lot of choice. You've talked about that. We have a lot of opportunities to work on different things. And so like the big problem, you know, let's get our time back. Let's give people their time back. You may or may not care about that, but there's all of these other little sort of problems that kind of align with that you might care about. And or you may just care about a really technical like uh system design and want to learn more about that. And those are okay too. And then like the other thing that you talked about is like people's stuff changing over time. And I think that's really important. I want to take maybe a step back and talk about like Dan Pink and Drive. Because if you want people like I mean, and we have to just confess this ourselves as a startup or as a company that's trying to make things work and thinking about bringing other people on. But I think this is also really important for like business leaders just generally to think about is that if we want people to care about our passion or our mission, we first have to make sure that we are meeting their basic needs. We have to pay them enough that they are not in a survival mindset, that they're not in a short-term scarcity mindset, because people don't think about big world-bending problems if they're trying to figure out how they will pay their bills. And so if you want people to care, you have to pay them more. Not because like people are greedy or whatever. We actually know that that's not the case. There's a cliff to when financial incentive you fall off of it. I think like I mean these numbers are not accurate to the world we're in now, but like when Drive was written, it was like 75 grand. People stopped trying to work for overtime after they were making 75 grand. Obviously, that number is going to be a little higher now, but there's a cliff. I don't think people are greedy and selfish, but you have to pay them enough to get them out of a scarcity mindset so that they're not thinking about money anymore. Because if they're thinking about money, they can't think about the mission. And that's really, really critical. And I think that kind of drives to what you're talking about with Gary Vee is that once you get them to stop thinking about money, now they have a whole host of interests that they begin to think about. And they begin to rebalance all of their life's priorities, not around scarcity, but around like opportunity and abundance, right? And so they're like, where do I want to invest what I have to get more of something else? And you and I have talked a lot about that. We're both pretty much aligned that what we want is more freedom and more time. Um, but like that may change for us, right?
Yep.
And that's really at its core. Is like I think once we if we want people to be passionate about what we're passionate about, we have to pay them enough that they're not thinking about where the money's coming in. Because if they're thinking about that, they're not going to be thinking about the mission or even really the project. Like I want to be really like that if when people are thinking about food, they're not thinking about like project deadlines, they're not thinking about systems design, they're not even thinking about deliverables. They're definitely not thinking about like ending world hunger. They're thinking about ending their hunger, and that's
Yeah.
okay. And so I just really want to hone in on like if we want people to be passionate about what we're passionate about, we need to pay them more.
Yeah. When you were saying that, I was thinking about myself. I think it's really important that, okay, because we've talked about story and spectacle last, week, and with story, a lot of times the way stories are told or written, the writer or director is trying to allow you to see yourself in their shoes, right? In the protagonist shoes, maybe, or in maybe the supporting character. Like, hey, I can see myself. That's me. Um, I can see myself in what you were talking about, right? And especially when you said that once you start solve the problem of like, okay, well, I'm not no longer thinking about feeding my family. I'm no longer thinking about can I afford this home or my basic necessities. Once I stop thinking about that, now I can focus more on the other things. And I've been fortunate enough. I think we both have to have jobs that allow us to stop thinking about those at least for now, right?
Right.
And it allows us to focus on other things that are important to us, and then it shifts, like you said. Now we're more focused on how do we, get that time back,
Yeah.
maintaining the pay, right, and getting the time back. And so it allows us to now focus on this problem that we're interested in solving, or the
Right.
plethora of problems that we're interested in solving. And the other part of this that and so I absolutely agree. I don't think people are greedy. I think people just they want to like not have to worry about feeding their family. They want to not
Right.
have to worry about that. Most people don't want to be millionaires. Most people don't like if you really like hone in and ask more questions, they really don't. They just want to be, comfortable. They want to be
Right.
able to go out and get a nice meal when they want or take a vacation once a year or twice a year. I mean,
Absolutely.
it's really just that. And they want their kids to not grow up hungry.
Yeah.
Um, if you solve those problems for people, and pay them a respectable wage, especially if your company is making good money, um, then it makes sense to do that. Let them focus on the other things. Let them then start to hopefully care about the things that you also care about. But here's the other thing that you mentioned, and I love this. We talk about like, every company has like these missions or core values or whatever. And I'm not necessarily saying that we are buying into that 100%. Like we're gonna have our own set, like everybody else. We're not necessarily trying to just follow the beaten path or whatever it is. But if I would say, like we had a motto or we had an ideal, right, or a set of things, one of them would definitely be what you said, which was bring your own passion.
Hmm.
Studio Anvil is definitely that. It's bring your own passion because it allows us to do that. You brought a ton of things. One of them being propeller.
Hmm.
We both talked about Rubber Duck, so Rubber Duck was kind of like a joint venture. Rubber Duck's been something that I'm pretty passionate about. There's a couple other things that I'm pretty passionate about, but what this does is it allows me to care. If I can bring the thing that I care about
Right. Exactly.
under this umbrella, right, then this cooperative, if you will, right, then I can bring the thing that I care about, work on the thing that I care about, and then if I want to take a break from that thing, I can go work on something else that's in that cooperative of technologies or projects or things that we're building, and I can care about them because our things shift. So I'm pretty passionate about Rubber Duck, and the reason being is that I know we have like Chat GPT and Bard today, and we have all these other things, but they don't solve the real problem. They don't solve the problem of I need a real human,
Yeah.
right? They will never solve that problem. I mean, of I need to talk to a real human. We've had like chat bots for a long time. The little bots that show up in the corner of the screen, like you're about to buy a car or you look at your car shop
Mm.
and somebody's like, "Can I help you today?" And it's just a bot who doesn't even know how to answer the dang questions.
Yeah.
And
Mm.
sure, Chat GPT is going to get a little bit better, and they're going to continue to get better, but they will never replace a human. And that's one of the reasons that I'm so passionate about Rubber Duck because you're going to have another human on the other end that says, "Hey, I've faced that
Yeah. That
that
exactly.
situation, that problem before, and I can walk you through it and I can teach you along the way, right? Or guide you." And so absolutely, you can sense my passion with that. you've got a bunch of things that are your passion projects, right? But the thing is that if I get bored with it, then I can be passionate about something else for the next couple weeks or 6 months.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. I love what you're talking about with Rubber Duck. I know we haven't talked about it in a while. We also just launched a new version of it, which fixes some critical bugs and have more to come. This is a space we're passionate about. Coming back to like last week and a little bit about like what we're talking about this week and getting everyone to care is like we talked about story and spectacle last week, and when you think about like classic narratives, every sort of like heroic narrative has one thing in common, and that is the role of a mentor. The role of a mentor. Man, mentorship in our society is a warp whistle. It is a way to like level yourself up really fast. Like I used to talk about it, like I don't know if you remember like the days of WoW, World of Warcraft and stuff, and like people would like power level you. And what that would mean is you would go hang out as a newbie with a whole bunch of like really high level characters, and the high level characters would go fight the high level monster, and you would get like some of the experience, and so you would level a lot faster. That's what mentorship really is exactly that, is somebody taking you and bringing you along as they solve the hard problems and helping you solve your problems so that you level up a lot faster. And that's the promise of, and I think ChatGPT and other AI, communicative AIs, large language models are really going to help facilitate some of this. I really do think that those things are going to help us learn faster. But I think at its core, they only help you at a certain point. All of my time in teaching, and probably your time too, is that you really start to learn when you learn to ask the questions right. When you learn to ask the question in a specific way. And like until then, like you're throwing spaghetti at a wall for ChatGPT until you learn how to tweak your question to get the kind of response that you need from ChatGPT. But observing and having that conversation with an actual human is going to facilitate you finding the way to ask those questions much faster. Like a good old-fashioned Socratic dialogue is really what we're talking about. Like I see that over and over again, that like that's what's so great about Rubber Duck, is it's literally about that. It's learning to like think through and process a problem with somebody that has that skill set. And so it is something that we're passionate about. And like, does it fit into like the big mission of like give you your time back? There's a way. We're not ready to talk quite about that yet, I don't think, but there's a way in which it does. But at its core, it allows you to bring your passion. And like, we haven't talked about this on the show, but like everything that we have now really is because Rubber Duck came first. We talked a little bit about this with Lewis yesterday, but like even our very first server is still to
Yeah.
this day RD1, and it's still there like running because like Rubber Duck was first, and so that's a part of our story, but it's also a part of like our passion, and it's a part of how we get to care. Like I know you just spent a bit of time fixing a pretty persnickety and persistent bug in Rubber Duck, and like we've all kind of like talked about that problem, and so it's exciting, and we celebrate with like it going live now, and that's another way that people care. Like the other thing that I think about is like, and we've talked a lot about this, you and I, and it's core to the principle of Anvil, and that is like it is easier to work when other people care with you. Like it's solopreneuring, like you've tried it, I've tried it. Like it is laborious and lonely work. It sort of reminds me something really exciting's happened and is kind of in line with like what I'm trying to do with my life this year, is like I'm trying to find ways to like bring my family into the things that I'm interested in, right? Like kind of getting back to like I want to have hobbies, and one of those things, as you know, is working out in the yard. And so like very recently, probably in the last 2 weeks, like anytime I go out in the yard, Stephen will want to grab the rake and go rake. And like, I mean, he's 3.5, so like how effective is raking? You know what? He's picking stuff up, like it's getting stuff. I'm still gonna be raking, but he's like he's helping. And like honestly, but that makes it a lot easier to get out there and
Right.
do. It makes it so much easier to get out there and do, because he's interested in doing it too. He's excited. He wants to go and get the rake. And so like I can go and weed and he can rake. And like it makes it easier to create the time and the space. And then there's energy, like to the extent that the other day, like I was like, all right, it's time to go in and eat. And he didn't want to, he wanted to keep raking. And I was like, I mean, I feel that passion because that's me. I'll be out there raking all night. I was out last night raking until after the sun went down, like in the dark, like raking. Like I'll create this big old pile and then have to scoop it up the next morning. Um, if anybody's wondering why I'm raking so much, I have several really old oaks in my backyard that just constantly shed leaves and acorns. And if you don't rake them up, of course, they'll grow other little oaks. Um, and so that's why I'm constantly raking. But yeah, like that's really at its core too, is like bring your own passion and let that passion be infectious. And like there's something to be said for sharing, right? Like you bring your passion to Anvil, and then we share it together.
Yeah, I was you were talking about your kids and working in the yard and stuff. So about like 2 weeks ago, we've had like all this rain. Grass has started to grow, weeds have
Yeah.
started to grow. So about 2 weeks ago, um, again, I have a 13-year-old and a 7-year-old, so they're a little bit older. And I remember when my 13-year-old was real small. Remember those little plastic lawnmowers? He used to have one of those, and I would be cutting the grass. This was at another house, and he would be pushing it. So basically, he was helping me cut the grass, and it was really cool. So as kids get older, sometimes they develop their own interests and they want to go do their own thing. So about 2 weeks ago, I said, "Hey, we've got to cut this grass. It's looking pretty bad. We got lots of rain, all that good stuff." And of course, the little one, he didn't want to. He wanted to go do something else. And my older one, he was like more reluctant, but he kind of has started to say it has to be done.
Yeah.
So we get out there, and what I said was, "Look, I can be out here by myself for 3 hours, or we can work as a team, and we can be out here for 1 hour,
Yeah.
right? And we can work as a team, and we can get this done really quickly." Um, and so there's lots of power in that, right? When you can get people to care just a little bit, if they care about, like this is going back to what you said, is that people need to care about each other. Not so much the work. It doesn't always have to be the work, but it has to be caring, for each other. So
Yeah.
we think about, Anvil, we think about this thing that we're building, this cooperative, bring your own passion. Going back to the boat, we're all sitting in this boat. Well, not everybody in the world, but like us, right?
Yeah.
Building this thing. We're sitting in this boat. And like if we go back months or whatever, it's just me and you sitting in this boat. And, sometimes I'm working on something, so I'm paddling. And then maybe I get tired and I say, Randy, can you take over for a little bit? And then you're like, okay, I'm gonna take over, right? So I'm handing off this work to you because I'm tired or I just lost interest in it. So,
Yeah.
but if you continue to paddle, we continue to move forward,
Yeah.
right? We don't stop and then let the current start to take us in the opposite direction, which is it's how we fail as a business, right? If nobody cares, we don't care for each other. And if I can't rely on you to pick up the slack, and
Yeah.
I think there was a ticket that, so now we've got Lewis in the boat. And there's tickets sometimes where you'll hand them off to Lewis and Lewis will do them, right?
Hmm.
Or maybe Lewis will not have much progress with it and he'll give back to you. And there was some front end work that, you were doing for a little bit and then like, I'm just going to push up what I have and then maybe I'll pick it up, right? But
Yeah.
ultimately we're all in this boat. We can all paddle together. We can paddle, synchronously or asynchronously. We can take turns. But as long as somebody's paddling, we continue to move. And we see this with what we're doing, right? This is where, like, there's lots of solopreneurs that make it,
Hmm.
but you mentioned that it can be lonely, right? It's laborious. But if you have, multiple people, right? As you bring people on, you get them to care about me, right? Like, hey, if I'm tired, I want to be able to give you something.
Yeah.
Going and putting people in place that like you can count on. We've talked about this before. I think we both have a list of folks that, hopefully if things take off, we can say, I want to go get that person because I know that when I get tired from paddling, I'm going to be able to ping this person or tag that person in and they're going to pick it up
Yeah.
and we're going to continue to move forward and hopefully in the direction that, allows us to, kill the 9 to 5.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, there's a lot there, and like the other thing that I think about is like you mentioned, like people that can paddle with us, and there's also like the folks that have just completely different skill sets, right? Like, I think I'll just say Adam, right? We've talked about Adam
Right.
quite a
Yep.
bit. Like I imagine that like if we could get Adam in Anvil, things would move a lot faster because there's an entire skill set there that is just not represented in our small group at the moment. And so that's really great. I think I want to spend just a few minutes, Ram, and then I do need a drop, but I want to spend just a few minutes and talk about like things that as that we have to be cautioned about, or cautious about when we try to like develop communal passion. And it takes me all the way back to what you started the conversation with, talking about like the Silicon Valley and everybody is like going to change the world. And this ties a lot back to like story and spectacle, right? I think what I don't want us to do is like make this huge promise, lots of promise. And if all we're doing is building another SaaS app, right? Like, and I'm not saying that that's all Amwell is doing, right? But like you see so often that like, we're going to change the world. How? By building another SaaS app. And it's like,
Exactly.
but you know, most of the internet or most of the world doesn't even have the internet. So is that going to change the world, or is it going to change like, you know, a very myopic and like narrow, like culture centric problem? And like that, I mean, I just want to say that like when it's okay maybe to believe that like your idea is going to change the world, but I don't know that we want to try to convince others that that's what we're doing, because I don't know that that's a fair promise. Like we're not you know, like keeping our story grounded in reality. And the other is that I want to make sure, kind of coming back to what I was talking about a little earlier, is that um we're putting the amount, like passion and pressure have to be balanced, right? And like we want to make sure that we are communicating really, really clearly what's at stake, so that folks, like the amount of like that there's no artificial stress, because like it's not like we're gonna, you know, like this isn't a rocket ship to Mars. um and so, you know, and even if it were, frankly, like we set our own timeline, so there's no reason to say like we got to do it in the next 3 years. Like we don't. You know, like uh, there's no shortage of opportunity to get a rocket ship to Mars with people on it, you know, in the next 10 years or whatever. And so like I think those things are really fair. um and then the other one, you know, coming back to what you said earlier with I forgot his name now, but also like Dan Pink talks about it in Drive, and that's to know what people are intrinsically passionate about, and not to try to incentivize their work by creating artificial gaps in their interests. And I think about this specifically in pay, where like you pay people so little that you're like, oh, well, I'll pay you overtime to hustle and get this out the door. And what you've done is you've created that artificial gap that will make them do the work for you. But honestly, I think that in most cases where that's people begin to like it's the relationship between people, the people is not grounded, and like they don't care about each other. And so I think that's also really, really key, is that I don't want us to do that. So I think like those two things are top of mind for me when we think about like how we get people to care. And so I'd maybe leave it to you to talk about what are the things that we should be doing to make sure that people care about our work, especially the three of us, right? We had a conversation yesterday, and making sure that we care about our work is really important. So maybe you can we can wrap up by you tell me what we can do to make sure that we all care about what we're doing.
Yeah, first of all, I'll be the first to say I don't want anybody working overtime. Like I don't want to work overtime. But you know this.
Yeah.
There was a job a while back, and I ended up talking to the director, and I asked, "How many hours a week do y'all work?" Because if y'all work 60 hours a week, that's not me. And I was pretty clear about it. I think one of the things, right, getting people to care, all that good stuff, is just to show that you care and to
Mm,
be open, right? So um, we've all had like leaders in the past, whether they're like CEO, CTO, director, whatever it is, and they've been really difficult to talk to.
yeah.
You know, the different companies that we worked at, and then we've had probably other folks that are really easy to talk to, right? If you can, if we can have that type of environment or culture, right? I hate to use the term culture really because culture kind of says this is the way we do things, and you have to fit within that. And so I'm not a huge fan of that, but if we can establish some, you know, a pattern that says we actually care about the things you care about. And even if we can't necessarily align completely with them, we don't want you to stop caring about the things that you care about or to deprioritize the things that you care about.
Mm, right.
Um, and I'll go back to this, right? Your family is going to win every time. If your son
Every
is
time.
sick, if one of your kids is sick, if your wife is sick, or if something's going on, that's always going to be your priority. And it should be.
Yeah.
And so we should simply allow you to do that, allow you to care about the things that you care about while you help us to build this thing. And if you care a little bit about what we're doing, then that's cool. But either way, we're going to compensate you accordingly, you know, or
Yeah.
fairly for the work that you're doing.
Yeah, I think that's really key is fair, fair compensation. And you hit the nail on the head there is like we don't want people to think that like in working with us, their passions have to be an afterthought. Like, like, oh, well, you give us all your best energy of the day, and then you spend like whatever energy you have left on your passions. It shouldn't be that way. It should be much more equitable. And so like I love that you brought that up, that like, hey, we want you to keep your passions. We want you to focus on them because you're gonna be better. We're all gonna be better if we all
This
keep our passions.
this is the last thing I'll say on this is that we've worked at companies, and if you're in software, this is very true to you most of the time. You learn to keep your passion projects to yourself. Why? Because if you talk about them or do certain things during work, then the company kind of owns that IP.
Hmm.
I don't care if you talk about your side project. I want you to talk about your side project because guess what? You might talk about it and I'm going to see your passion. I'm going to say, hey, look, do you want to bring that under this umbrella and we'll all benefit together? No? Okay. Keep doing your passion project. That's one of the things that irks me so much. I've worked at some companies at USA. I mentioned this idea and basically they accepted it. They did a prototype and they grounded it. And I
Hmm.
can't build the thing today because they own the IP,
Yeah.
right? Like they could sue me for this idea. And it's an idea that I still think has lots of legs today. And it frustrates me so much. Um, so yeah, I mean, if anybody comes to work with us one day and you've got a passion project, bring it. Bring your
Yeah.
own passion.
Yeah, I think maybe the big accidental takeaway here is we want people to bring their own passion.